It was very, very successful. It was called obliteration. We assessed that the American strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities has set back Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons for many years to come. We've collected additional intelligence. We've also spoken to people who have seen the site, and the site is obliterated. And we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out.
NBC News cannot confirm if Iran actually moved their nuclear materials out of those facilities before the U.S. strikes. We begin with former U.S. ambassador to NATO under President Obama, Ambassador Ivo Daalder, and global affairs journalist Kevin Barron, president of Elevation Global Strategies. Let me start with you, Kevin. What were your takeaways in terms of what we just heard from the president, and whether there was any clarity in terms of where we stand right now in terms of Iran's nuclear program? I'm sorry, we don't have your audio, Kevin. We're going to work on getting that back. Let me go to. Oh, we have you. We have you now. Please continue.
Thank you. Look, I've said as a journalist who's covered the Pentagon for 15 years and lots of NATO summits, the headline that struck me was Trump telling the world, boasting to the world that he gave Iran permission to strike a U.S. military base. That line where he said that when they asked, "Oh, is 1 o'clock okay?" I said, "Fine, sure. We move people out. Go right ahead." That, to me, is unbelievable. I think that's something we can't just paper over and take as the normal course of events in this combat mission that happened. So I'd start with that. Second, the reporting and the back and forth about this intelligence assessment. I was the editor of a defense publication for 10 years and spent a lot of my time being very careful with headlines and how we characterize what we're reporting. I think there's a little bit of truth on both sides here. This is an initial intelligence assessment. It's from DIA, yes, but it did say low confidence. If you don't lead with that, you set up this kind of conflict, and it's kind of, you give a win to the people you're reporting on to come back and say, hey, you're mischaracterizing here. I think we're seeing a little bit of that happening. The president's right to say that this is an initial report. It's a DIA report. It's not the official White House assessment. It's by no means a final assessment. But where they go over the line is this just insistence that they got it right. The obliterated line and the very odd kind of childish deflection of, oh, why don't you reporters, why are you making the pilots feel bad? I guarantee you no pilot feels bad about the job they did. They did just fine. And it's not the job of the media to be, celebrating the president's wins or the military strikes. It's their job to report on them. So I think, Kelly O'Donnell did a great job in that press conference with her exchange with the president. But the constant denigration of the media reporting, especially abroad at a NATO event, is just something you never see in normal times. It's one of the, yet again. And that line of the president admitting that he gave Iran permission to attack a U.S. military base is just unfathomable to me.
I want to bring back NBC's Courtney Kube from the Pentagon. And Courtney, we heard from the defense secretary, who also brought up this intelligence report that was leaked, saying that it was a low confidence report, meaning that there's low confidence in the data in that report because it was perhaps a little bit dated and that nobody's been on the ground and that the evidence is under the rubble. And yet, wouldn't that also indicate that when we hear from the administration, their assessment that everything was obliterated is also on shaky ground and is not certain?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So they're basically trying to have it both ways here. It's that this, again, it's a U.S. government product that found that there was likely destruction that was done to at least Fordo that set it back a number of months, up 3 to 6 months. It did not find that the nuclear program was destroyed altogether. But then we have the president who's citing other intelligence agencies and other countries saying, oh, well, it was destroyed, so they must be right because it fit the narrative. I mean, Anna, if the president hadn't come out that first day and said that the program had been obliterated, something that was repeated even again today, if they hadn't said, he and those around him hadn't continued to say that the program wasn't obliterated, this may not be such a dispute. It may just be, this is an early assessment. And I think we should call it that. This is a very early, preliminary assessment. President Trump even said that more information had already come in. We expect more information will continue to come in. But that does not change the fact that this first assessment found what it did. One thing I completely agree with Kevin that it is absolutely striking that the president has been so open about Iran telegraphing that they were going to target a base in Qatar that houses U.S. troops that has not only thousands of Americans there, but also millions and millions of dollars in American hardware there. It's the biggest base housing Americans in the entire region. The fact that he acknowledged that Iran gave the U.S. a heads up, but then also essentially said, yeah, OK, we'll get everyone out of there and then you guys can carry out your attack. That's a remarkable acknowledgement that we just heard from him in a very casual way. But I'm also struck by the fact that when asked about this classified assessment, rather than say we're not going to talk about a classified intelligence community product, instead the initial reaction is just to attack the media about it. So they are essentially confirming the conclusions of this assessment because they're talking about something that, again, is classified. It's several remarkable and very unusual things that we don't normally hear out of the president of the United States here, Anna.
Ambassador Dalder, I'm wondering what kind of a curveball this whole Iran situation was, and all this talk about what intelligence to believe is for the NATO summit.
Well, in some ways, it was a nice curveball because it withdrew attention, which what many European leaders, including the NATO Secretary General, were worried about from the repeated statements by President Trump that he was thinking about perhaps withdrawing from NATO or leaving. Even as he was flying to the summit, he said there are multiple definitions of what Article 5 means, implying that somehow the ironclad guarantee that an attack against one is an attack against all is something that can be called into question. So while Iran overshadowed the summit, it allowed the actual NATO business to move forward in the way that European leaders had planned and hoped, which is to get the president of the United States to come to the summit to reaffirm that America will remain engaged in NATO, to give him and allow him to claim a win on more defense spending, which is something he has pressed for. Of course, one of the reasons we have more defense spending is because the United States under Donald Trump is called into question whether the United States will continue to defend Europe. He has called Ukraine a European issue. He refused to say that Vladimir Putin is a threat or an adversary, even when he was asked during the press conference. So there are major differences between Europe and the United States. But the good news for, I think, NATO, the good news for Europe, and the good news, frankly, for the United States is that the president of the United States came to NATO for 24 hours and is leaving with the alliance very much intact and the Europeans committed to doing a lot more.